Hello, everybody. It's James here, WSI, and my next guest, I believe he is celebrating his 60th year in the business, one of the most storied careers in the history of wrestling. Not only is the legendary one half of the legendary tag team, the Sheepherders / Bushwhackers, but also a trainer, a booker, and everything else in between. It is Bushwhacker Luke. How the devil are you?
Whoa, g'day, James. Bloody lovely, tell your mother. Yeah, I'm glad. And I'm glad to be on your show today, James, and let the world know about the little boy from New Zealand and made it to the big time and finally getting into the WWE Hall of Fame.
What did you know? This was going to be for the second bunch of interviews, but WWE Hall of Fame, some people go there and say, oh, I wasn't that bothered, but then they come out the other end and say, man, what a special day that was. Talk about the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's a special day, mate, because that's announced. You know, I'm in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, which has been picked to go in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Has been picked by all the past people in that Hall of Fame and pro wrestling, people involved in pro wrestling, where the WWE Hall of Fame, that's picked by Vince, and that's special because Vince is number one company in the world. Mm. Well, Vince's company, the WWE, as Vince has already stepped down, so we hear.
Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, I may be asking you about that in a little bit. In fact, you know what? Why don't I ask it now? We don't have to do it from time order. So Vince McMahon has retired, but actually been forced out. But of all the things you've heard about Vince recently, what do you think about his retirement and what he meant to you in your career?
Well, to me, you know, I've got to thank Vince for my career. I wouldn't be doing this now if it wasn't for WWE, NWA, and all the other stuff before WWE, WWF. I was a wrestler. Come to WWF, I become a celebrity. You know what I mean? It's a different walk in life, and it's a different level. And where people know you from all walks of life. With NWA, they know you as a wrestler. And I can't, you know, I can never knock Vince McMahon. He was good to us. Now, the situation today, why he's not there, I think he got out before a lot of things come out to the public. You know, it could be a lot, I don't know, but there could be a lot of backlash out of the situation.
Yeah, he's paid, or so we believe to have paid, at least $14.6 million in hush money and NDAs and all this kind of thing. And I think some are yet to come out as well. So it's an interesting time to be an observer.
It is like that, James. You know, as soon as the dirt comes out on somebody, everybody else who has something bad to say about it and think they can pick up a dollar will come out of the woodwork and try and grab that extra dollar. You know what I mean?
Do you
hush money, bro? Hush money, James.
Yeah, it's a lucrative enterprise, hush money, especially with the WWE.
Yes.
I'll have to ask about it. Did you ever hear any rumors of Vince having a tickle with some of the staff or some of the valets or anything like that during your tenure with the WWF?
You heard a lot of stories, but you know how rumors go. You know, there's a lot of haters in WWF when guys got, you know, fired or let go, they became haters, you know what I mean? But you can't sit in one product. You know, that's a revolving business. People who are watching you, after a certain amount of time, they want to see fresh faces. And you've got to turn over talent. You know what I mean? Well, a lot of the guys don't understand that. You know, they think they should be there for life. But, you know, that's life, you know. You move on. Unless you recreate yourself, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to do a weekly podcast with Don Morocco, and he shares the same sentiment as you, is that a lot of, I mean, this has nothing to do with the NDAs and hush money, but these are like ex-employees who are unhappy they're not still with the company. And Don Morocco always said, well, no one ever said to me that Vince was going to pay my pension. He doesn't owe me that.
No, what a nice guy Don is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know him. He lived in New Zealand for a while too. I wasn't there at the time. I was over here, but you know, I've been with him a lot, you know, on the road, and that, well, not a lot, but a nice Hawaiian guy.
Yeah. Yeah, a gentle giant, definitely. Do you know, speaking, because you mentioned New Zealand, we're going to go straight back to the beginning, and not your childhood, but can you tell me at least the state of wrestling in New Zealand before you got into the business? You got in the business 62, was it?
Yes.
So what was wrestling like before you got into the business? Was it on TV? Was it popular? How was it?
Mate, for a start, James, we never got TV till 68.
Oh.
We never got television till 68. And it was only one channel. It opened at 8, opened 3 o'clock in the afternoon and went off at 8 o'clock at night. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And by the time we got wrestling on television, that was 75, 76. I think we had 2 channels, owned both by NBC One, New Zealand Broadcasting One, and New Zealand Broadcasting Two. 2 channels.
So I'm assuming it was just word of mouth and posters to get fans into the buildings.
I didn't even know about wrestling. I never heard of wrestling. I never saw any wrestling. I didn't know about wrestling, and that till I went to the gym with my neighbor. I'm going to get to the story, and that's where I started. You know, I never even heard of wrestling. I never seen a boxing ring or wrestling or anything.
So what did you know of even boxing at that time then? I mean, you must have had an idea of wrestling and boxing, or just absolutely nothing, and then someone asked if you wanted to do it.
No, all I knew was about rugby.
Oh.
rugby and bloody cricket. The cricket too, those 3-day tests and 5-day tests, boy, they put you to sleep.
Hmm.
You know, I never knew any of those sports. They were non-existent. There was a gym in Wellington. I was born in a suburb of Wellington, the capital, called Lower Hart, 8 miles away, 6 or 8 miles away. There was a gym in Wellington that I never heard of, was called Coolman's. Coolman's was well known in the British Empire or the Commonwealth Empire. A lot of your Commonwealth Games boxers and amateur wrestlers and amateur boxers came through that gym, you know, when they were on the tour. It's throughout the Commonwealth. You know, the countries in the Commonwealth, right? South Africa, India, Australia, New Zealand, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, I never even heard of Coolman's. And in Coolman's, there was 2 rings. They were a foot above the ground, and that the floors were as hard as concrete, because they're boxing rings. 4 ropes, and there were 20 feet between ropes. Now, this is one thing I never knew. I didn't know, but I never understood. The police for the commission, promoters, I found out later on, promoters had to send to the police station 6 weeks ahead of time the card that we're going to run in that town. And that so the police could look at the people and check on them to see if they had any convictions. How's that? If you had convictions, they didn't want you working in public. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, the police would arrive an hour, 2 hours before the show at the wrestling. They would measure the ring to make sure it was 20 feet between the ropes. Who the hell cares if it's 19'6", right? 19'6". Had to be 20 feet between the ropes. And they would check the turnbuckle pads to see that they were so thick and they were tight on the turnbuckles. And then I'm jumping ahead a bit here. I'm just telling you the rules. You weren't allowed to punch or kick in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. This is going back in the 60s. You could do the British uppercut, you know, and that, or you could do the forearm, you know,
the flip,
forearm,
the flip, yeah.
elbow jolt, or the British uppercut, and then you could do a knee drop. You can drop the knee over guy's chest, or do a leg drop. You know what I mean? But you couldn't kick or punch.
I just, you know, I mean, not that we want to go back to those days, but I do love the simpler times when wrestling actually had rules.
Yeah. Oh, they don't. boy, this AEW, no, I'm jumping too far here.
No, don't worry.
But the referees are in the ring. I don't even know why they have referees in the ring, because they're out for 2 minutes out on the floor. The counts are so slow. A 10 count is 30 seconds or 40 seconds. You know what I mean? Nothing mean. It's not worth having a referee in the ring.
Yeah.
Anyhow, getting back to when I started. So, my next door neighbor was a bodybuilder. He was about 3 years older than me. And he was about 225 pounds, 16 stone 6 or whatever you call it, 225 pounds. And he went into a Mr. New Zealand contest, and the judge in the Mr. New Zealand contest was a former Mr. New Zealand, 1950. Now we're talking about, this is 1961. The judge is the former, 11 years beforehand, he was Mr. New Zealand. My next door neighbor came second in the contest or something like that. And then the judge said to him, "Hey, do you want to make some money with that body?" And my neighbor said, this is third party now, James. He said to, "How?" He says, "Wrestling." He says, we lived in the suburb of Lower Hart. He says, "Come into the Coolman's gym. And on such and such a day, the days he's going to be there, and we'll go, you can see what it's all about." So my partner went in. Now this gym, because I went there later, this gym was like in the first Rocky movie. Remember that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
The steam room, the steam pipes rattling. You know how all of a sudden the steam pipes rattle, then it settles down, then it waits to build up steam again, and you can hear the pipes rattling in the gym. There was kettlebells lying over the floor. I'm talking about scattered. There's along the wall, the back, there's two 20-foot, 20-foot rings with about 15 feet in between them. You know what I mean? And there was only two. They're not machines, they're racks. There was a Scott rack and a bench press rack. And that was it, mate. And there was a few barbells on the floor, but there's kettlebells everywhere. You know what I mean? And laying down. Guys that used them where they were and just drop them. You know what I mean?
I hate that. People still do that now. I hate that.
No, all the gyms over here, all the weights are racked. You don't see fucking stuff laying around now. Otherwise, they kick you out of the gym.
Good.
You know what I mean?
With what was the? I hate to use the word, but what was the smartening up process like for you?
Smartening up.
Yeah.
Well, let me start in here. So 6 months after he'd been in the business, he asked me if I want to come to the gym. Here I am, 170 wet, 170 pound wet, maybe 165, 170. So I start going to the gym with him. Now, I've never seen a wrestling match, and I'm going to the gym with him, and I've been pushing on the weights, and I'm hopping in the ring with him. And he's been doing it for 6 months, 7 months, 3 or 4 days a week. So he knows, now he knows. We were working British style, mat work, but on the left-hand side. No, right, I was working right side, left side, all the stuff, and a lot of mat work, chain wrestling, right? And now, I started doing that stuff with him and going and lifting a bit of weight in the gym there. And I went to one wrestling match in the capital city, Wellington. I don't think there was anyone there because the guy who's the promoter in Wellington was the guy who was the ex-Mr. New Zealand. He actually ran 3 times a year with the local boys in the Wellington Town Hall, or maybe 4 times a year with the local boys. And that, but if they got a guy in from overseas like Canada or the British Empire, he'd come in for a month or 2 months and he'd work twice a week, once in Wellington and once in Auckland. Then he'd come back the next week and get returns, you know what I mean? Or maybe go into a tag match. And so that's when, and maybe 2, you'd get 3 shows a week. We'd do a small spot show away from the capital. Anyhow, my first show I went to, And I don't know whether it was an overseas guy. It could have been Pat O'Connor.
Oh.
NWA champion was Pat O'Connor back in the 60s.
Mm.
Pat O'Connor had drawn the biggest house with Nature Boy Rogers in Chicago in 61. And that 40,000 people.
Yeah, was that Comiskey Park?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, you know more than me.
No, that was a stab in the dark, that one.
Anyhow, he came over. And maybe that was in the way of my first wrestling match. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, my neighbor said to me, I'm working in Palmerston North, which is 100 miles away, on Wednesday night. Do you want to come with me? So I went with him to Palmerston North. And the building was 1,500 people, sold out. These buildings were sold out because they never had wrestling. You know what I mean? Maybe in the capital, you had it twice or three times a year. If that. I never knew they had wrestling because I lived in a suburb and you only had newspapers, to advertise. You only used to advertise the newspaper. So I go to my second match now, and one of the early prelim boys don't arrive. Next minute, they yell out to me, what size feet do you got? Next minute, airborne, a pair of wrestling boots. Next minute, airborne, a tank top. And I had a pair of jeans on. Next minute, I'm in the bloody ring. Now, don't ask me what happened in that match. No, nothing. I know I worked with a Samoan kid. And that was my first match. That was in 1962. Now I got the feel of things. Next time they ran at Wellington Town Hall, and the main thing, I was early. I was an early match. Now those days, mate, it was amateur wrestling up to the first intermission. Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
And this is in the capital, and then there'd be a couple of matches to the second intermission, and after the second intermission, it'd be the main event, Now, the pro matches, the semi-pro matches, they were 6 5-minute rounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we had the round system here as well.
Yeah. Now I'm going back to the 60s, mate.
Mm.
And then the main match was 8-minute rounds. Now, 8 6 48. Yeah, 8-minute rounds or 8 6-minute rounds. Now, if you didn't do in that main event, if you didn't do at least 6 rounds, the people wouldn't come next time. They'd feel if they got fucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was doing the 5 6-minute rounds. No, 6 6-minute rounds or 6 5-minute rounds. At least we had to do 5 rounds. You know what I mean?
Mm.
25 minutes with a minute between each round. Otherwise, the people thought they would get fucked. And that's in the capital. Now, in the other towns, it'd be amateurs up to the first intermission. Then after that, I would work with somebody in a single. Butch would work with somebody in a single, and I would come into the end of his match. And the other guys that I worked with would come in 2 on top, and then we'd set it up to come back with a tag after intermission. So then they've already had. So we had amateur intermission. We had 2 single matches till intermission, and then we'd come back in a tag. The 2 guys before, and that we'd do a tag match, and then the main event would be on the end of the night. That's how it was in all the spot shows.
Yeah.
So there's only carrying 2, 4, 6 to 8 guys. That's all there was on the card.
I bet they didn't pay you double as well. Hey, but before
getting paid £3 a match or £2 a match.
With I've written a book about The Rock, and I write a tiny bit about New Zealand wrestling in that because I believe he's scouted by a guy called Steve Rickard, Peter Maivia. This is. I was wondering.
I'm going to get up to that part when they came to New Zealand. Get up to that in a minute.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you straight away. Peter Maivia memories. If you ever wrestled him?
Many times. Anyhow, that's how I started. And I started as, I dyed my hair blonde and started as gorgeous. My name was Ted Williams, and I was going as Gorgeous Teddy Williams. Now Vietnam War started in the early 60s to late 70s. And Jim Barnett, a well-known American promoter, was running coast to coast. The tapes were bicycled, but he was running from East Coast to West Coast promotions across the states. He had 20% or 50% of a lot of promotions. You know what I mean? He's a millionaire. He came down to Australia in 65 and opened up WCW.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went over to work for him in 66, he said that Gorgeous Teddy Williams was too long. He changed my name to Sweet William. And I learned to kick and punch, because we did chain wrestling and all that wrestling. We wouldn't do high spots. Well, there were high spots, but there was no running from rope to rope and all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, I'm out of that style now, and over in Australia, the matches were time limits, which happened in New Zealand when Barnett came over in 1970. He put 10-minute rounds or 12-minute rounds, and the matches would only go to 10 or 11 minutes. So he killed the round system. He killed the different round system, and we got more Americanized. Anyhow, I started going over there, and I'm working with guys. We were Australian boys and the Kiwis. We'd be doing squash matches for the Americans, and they're 3 minutes, 4 minutes. But I was making $250 a week. Where in New Zealand, I was making £3 a match. I think it's £3. Most I ever got paid for a match was £5, but £3 was a match. That was about $6. But the wages were only $25 a week at the time. You know what I mean? So working that match for £2 or £3, that was good money back in those days.
Can I ask you, do you have a Jim Barnett impression? Everybody does.
Oh, my boys. Oh, he's gorgeous.
Is that why you were sweet? He saw you and thought, there's a sweet boy.
Sweet William. Well, I was Gorgeous Teddy Williams. Long blonde hair, and it was rollers. I used to wear bobby clips in my hair and all that sort of stuff. I was working as a fag. Adrian Street became a good friend of mine. We'll get to that later. That was your guy over there in England.
He was. I've interviewed him as well, Adrian The Welsh.
Yeah,
he
he's
was
back
great.
in Wales.
Yeah.
I was booker in places, and he worked for me in territories. Anyhow, so I've got over to Jim Barnett now, blah, blah, blah. And I've learned to work American style. Punch, kick, and grab a hold. No chain wrestling, anything like that. Punch, kick, and work on a leg or an arm, and then grab it and go for submission. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A whole different system. And of course, it was selling out everywhere in Australia.
Then
that's how that, anyhow.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Butcher Me worked Singapore, and that we started going up into Singapore, and back. Steve Rickard was friends with King Kong out of Singapore, who's a promoter, used to run Bangkok and Singapore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He was in the movies a lot too, and that he was a 420-pound or 450-pound guy that never went off his feet, except if he did for a finish, and he'd always be by the ropes so he could pull himself up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Before I forget, I do want to grab a Peter Maivia story, because there's so little known about Peter.
We're getting up there now.
Oh, okay then, go for it.
Yeah. Anyhow, so anyhow, blah blah blah, and all that sort of stuff. Anyhow, I've done Singapore, Japan, and all that sort of stuff. Now Peter would come home. Peter had a home in New Zealand. Auckland, New Zealand's got the biggest Samoan population apart from Samoa. Auckland, New Zealand. And Peter used to come home to New Zealand and be on the road with us and that. So Butcher Me worked with him all over New Zealand. And a few trips I did to Australia, he was over there working for Jim Barnett. And that's how I worked with him too in Australia.
With Peter, is his reputation as a stone cold badass justified?
Tough fucking son of a bitch. You know, he had a body that it was natural, but he was thick and muscled, and he was sort of wide as he was high. But he had charisma. Charisma was pouring out of his ass. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He lay on the top ropes, across the ropes, between the rounds. You know what I mean? Like he's resting on a hammock. You know, and he had the sway and the moves in the ring. You know what I mean? With the things he did, he had that sway and move charisma. The people got behind him.
Yeah. Which version of the story of the fight between Peter Maivia and Billy Robinson did you hear, or was most prevalent within the business?
No, I heard that Peter knocked Billy down. Is that what you heard?
I've heard 3 different versions. That's the most said version, but then Billy has his own version where he won, of course.
Yeah, well, the Billy version. And then I'm not sticking up for Peter, but I heard that, you know, he wanted to wrestle, but Peter just went and bang and grilled him. You know, so those Samoans are strong, as you know.
Yeah. Who were
anyhow?
Yeah.
So
sorry, carry on.
So we're going to jump ahead of time. I'm going to jump over from when I was going up in Singapore and Bangkok and then Japan and that. And I think it was 1970. It was the 10th anniversary of independence for Samoa, and Butch went over to Samoa and worked with Peter. One big show. And the funny part is a Coke bottle broke against the table or something outside the ring, and Peter told Butch to throw him out. He went out and he landed on the broken glass and it slashed his leg open, and he yelled out to Butch, kick my leg. And the fucking Samoans roared up and all that blood was coming from his leg and that. Now, there was only supposed to be one show, and Peter was supposed to pin Butch. And Peter said to Butch, keep kicking my leg. He said, I'm going to make a comeback. When I make the comeback, you kick back out the ring and we'll go to the dressing room. So there was no finish because Peter already saw it in his mind. We'll have a return match in 2 days' time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which they did. They can't, there's so much blood and everything from Peter's leg. He got stitched up in that. And then they came back and had the return match 2 days later.
I was going to say, we're going to skip on a bit now. You end up in Canada. You go to Emile Dupree's Grand Prix territory in, I think it's the Maritimes. And
No way. I arrived in Canada, mate, for Steve Rickard knew the Vachons, Butcher Vachon and Magdad Vachon.
Yeah.
And they brought us in. Oh, by the way, Andre the Giant came to New Zealand in 1969, 1970, 7'4", 350 pounds.
Is that
I got a
legit,
photo on my phone.
though?
He don't look like Andre. Big afro hair, and he looks lean at 350. But he's holding his shoes. They're like bloody boats. Anyhow, he came to New Zealand. Butch and me worked all over the country with him, right? This is 69, 70. So when we come over to US, Andre came to North America in 71, and the territory he was brought into was owned by the Vachons, which was a French territory in Quebec. Now, our first territory they brought us over there to Quebec, to their territory in Montreal. It was called Grand Prix. Now, this Grand Prix territory was running, since the Giant was there, the place became on fire, and they were running 3 towns a night. Can you in a province or a state, whatever you like to call it, they ran Ontario and Quebec. All of a sudden, this one company's running 3 shows a night, and the Rougeos are running another town a night. So there's 4 shows a night in there. And of course, Andre was the main fucking baby face, and the main heel, it was the same guy that blew Australia wide open, Killer Kowalski. So we knew the main heel and main baby face. So that's where I started working, there for a year and a half. Now we went up, the pilot office was a spin-off, a little, pilot office up in Nova Scotia. They call it the Maritimes, New Brunswick. And that was Emile Dupree's territory.
Right.
It was running off the Montreal television. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
They'd bicycle up, and that's why we used to go up there. Mad Dog used to go out and be partners with Emil Dupree against me and Butch. And another time we went up, a big guy called Don Leo Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
He was a general. He was Don Leo, 325 pounds, 6'9". He was a general giant too. He was up there.
Just going with Jean Ferrer or Andre the Giant. I think he was Jean Ferrer still at the time. You said 7 foot, and you said 7'4". Everybody argues what his real height was. What do you think his real height was?
Well, I say it's going to be well over 7 foot when he was young.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But that giantitis, is the cartilage between the joints. You know, all your joints have got cartilages between. And over time, you know, they either grow or it wears out. That's what causes death, you know, the cartilage. And then he got shorter over time and a stoop too from his back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Give us some Andre the Giant stories then. So we've got to always ask the same question. The most you saw him drink in one sitting?
At one time, you know, he came up to work the top of Canada when we were working all the places and that for Gino Brito's father, Jack Britton, and Dominic Ducci. We came back, it was about a 6-hour drive back to Montreal, 7-hour drive, because we did a tour up there for a week against Andre and Dominic Lanucci. I always remember this. Now, Frank Bauer was the Andre's manager at the time. I looked after Andre, drove him everywhere. And we were in the car. They bought 72 beers, you know, and put it in the car when we left, right? They drank, in 2.5 hours, they drank that 72 beers. Frank Bauer was about 280, 290, 6'2", 6'3". He could drink beer too. Andre, a 12-ounce can was only 2 gulps, you know what I mean? Anyhow, we only got about 2.5 hours and we stopped and we had to pick up another 72 beers. That shows you how much, maybe 3 hours, they had drunk that much beer. Anyhow, when we stopped, Butch and me had blonde hair and black beards. We stopped at this truck stop. You know, you got truck stops in Europe now, in England now. You know, they're all, you pull off the road, there's usually a restaurant. They've got all stuff for trucks and that there, showers, you know, the stops and that, and the restaurant. We got out first and went to the car and went into the restaurant because we've been working against Andre. And these young kids, it was in springtime or summertime, and the kids were on holidays, and all these people who saw us, and they're yelling out, these college kids yelling out, tapet, which means faggot in French, right? Tapet. So the kids came into the truck stop after us, and Andre and Frank Bauer got out of their car and went over to their car, which was an old Volkswagen. Those two guys got on the side of it and lifted that Volkswagen up and put on its side. That's how strong that fucking, this is in the 71, 72. I'm just showing you the brute strength that bloody giant had at that time. Insane strength.
How did he change over the years then? Because I know obviously the weight of the world almost literally got him down as far as his body was changing and fighting against him. But was he? I mean, how did he sort of deal with people sort of in the later years compared to the early years?
As he got older, he had moods. You know, if he didn't like you, fuck, you were an enemy. And if he had to work with you in the ring, that bloody hand chop, instead of being a working chop, you could feel like you could pull the hand out of the chest. You understand what I mean? He put those chops in, you know what I mean? Those big hand chops. And there's a few people that fucked with him and that, and he let them know who the boss was.
I am going to, well, speaking of somebody who can teach you how the boss was, I'm going to ask you some questions about Stu Hart and Stampede. And I think I'll just throw it out like this. Give me your best Stu Hart impression and story.
They're my kids. I'm going to tell you the story how this day. They're my kids. What the fuck are you doing? they're my kids. Okay. After a year and a half of Grand Prix, Butcher or Morris or Caponte said to us, you can start, if you want to stay here, we'll have to start beating you. Because we were one of the main event tag matches in one of the towns, right? Mm-hmm. They said, I was leading Butcher around the collar and chain. Sweet William, we were doing Beauty and the Beast. Sweet William, and you had to change Butcher's name from Brute Miller to Butch. Well, he was changed to Nick Carter at the time. It was Sweet William and Nick Carter, and he was on the collar and chain. Anyhow, so they said, either you can stay here, but you have to start doing the honors, get beaten, or you can move on. We've got a place you can go called Grand Prix. I'd never heard of Grand Prix. I never heard of Stuart. I didn't know this guy had 12 kids, 8 boys and 4 girls. So we go into Calgary. We fly over there, and that we didn't drive because it was icy. We had a new car too. So we flew over there. On the Thursday, booked in a hotel. Friday night, we worked. Now, the fairgrounds in Calgary has got 2 arenas. It had the pavilion, and it had the corral. Pavilion, it held 33,000, 25 to 3,500. Every Friday night, they taped there, and it showed on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And it was bicycled over the rest of the territory. Understand what bicycle is?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it goes a week later around the rest of the territory.
Yeah.
Because they run the tape there, and the people in that town can see it the next day, but then all the other towns in the territory, tapes are sent to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so they're a week behind.
It's a week late everywhere else. Anyhow, we worked there on the Friday night, and the booker was Archie Goldie, the Mongolian Stomper. All the hills were big. Butch was about 235, 240, I was 220. We beat the champions. Well, we didn't. We got DQ'd. We used a chain or our flagpole. I don't know whether we had the flagpole. We used they were both laying in the ring bleeding. And that next minute, these fucking kids were thrown in the ring between 11 and 13. 2 of them were fucking bleeding. And the person outside the ring was yelling out, "Beat him up, champ, beat him up." Or in a high voice, "Beat him up, champ, beat him up, champ." That's how the voice was, right? So by the time we left the ring, there was the 2 champions bleeding, 2 kids bleeding, and 2 other kids laying there on the floor of the ring, and we left the ring. That's when we came back down the chute, and Stu was at the arena then. I heard about him, but I never met him. And there was this guy, 5'10", thick in the hips, thick in the shoulders, and that was big size. But you could tell he was very thick around the waist there. And what are you doing? They're my fucking kids. That's the first words we had heard out of them. You know what I mean? That voice, I guess you've heard that many times, right?
I've never heard that story before, no.
No, but you've heard that voice.
Oh, I've heard the voice many times. Did Stu ever, he was a bit grabby sometimes, and he'd just feel your arm, go, "Hey, you gotta," and then, try and put a hold on you.
You're a salty-looking bastard. I guess you could go a bit. You're a salty bastard. Anyhow, that was our invitation to Stu. And that weekend, he ran 3 times a year. He ran a double show. Friday night there, and then Sunday in the corral, the other building. The building now is not the corral, it's the King something or other, where they do all the pay-per-views out of Calgary. Fuck. Anyhow, it's a big arena, 18,000. But it was the other corral was 8, 10, 12,000. So Sunday they ran, I didn't know, we did Edmonton, which people had never seen us yet. They only saw us on it was played Saturday morning in Calgary. So when we came on Sunday to work the double show on Sunday in the corral, fucking people were throwing stuff at us and everything because they all knew kids. They all knew Stu's kids because the kids sold programs in the arenas, and they've been on television many times. We didn't have the drawing they were mad at us, but we didn't have the drawing power to get the people in. But the people there were throwing stuff, so that was the way we got over there straight away. And we worked there for a year and a half.
I was going to say, was Smith Hart the weirdest of the Hart kids?
Smith Hart, you hit the nail on the head. Every year there's a thing called the Calgary Stampede. Mm-hmm. People from all over the world come to that. Millions of people are at that. You know, it's a whole weekend thing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They have a big parade in the streets. There's over 1 million people in the street watching the parade. And then it goes into the fairgrounds, and they have aeroplanes going through small planes going through fire hoops, elephants. The circus comes up on a train, you know, Barnum and Bailey Circus.
Yeah.
It's everything there. And Stu always had in the parade, Stu always had a truck pulling a trailer with a ring on it. And he'd have all the boys in the ring, except me and Butch. We were sitting in the back of a convertible Cadillac with our manager in the parade and that. But Smith was on the fucking, on the ring and that. And right in the main part, as we're going along the drag there, Smith in his hometown dropped his trousers, his pants down to his fucking knees, and bent over and mooned all the crowd for about 50 yards, going down the street 100 yards. After that, Stu had to ship him out to Japan and put him in a dojo over there for 6 months. He shipped him out straight away.
Good for Smith. I'm glad about that story.
Now Smith used to grab girls. I don't know. You know, Smith liked the young girls too. You know what I mean? And he used to like to put them, he had a sauna bath at home. He used to like to put them in the sauna bath, then whack it up tight, up to 120 degrees, 130, and hear them scream and that. He was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't quite know how to respond to that.
He was wild. It's the way the things. A lot of things, you know. Sundays there were spot shows, and Stu used to let the boys run the spot show. And Smith being the oldest, and that we did it on an Indian reservation one time. The Indian guy drove the truck, and that we were working against Danny Bear and someone else on the Indian reservation, an Indian. And the guy who drove the truck was an Indian and wore a headband and all that sort of stuff. You could see he was an Indian straight away when you looked at him. So in this match, we told him to get up on the apron. He was in the Indian's corner and get up in that because we wanted to come back in a couple of weeks' time to a reservation. We had a sellout, and he was supposed to get up, and Butch was going to come over when he got up and whack him with a chain. And Butch said to him, "Have you got the blade ready?" And he said, "Oh, no, I don't." You know, he used to make out that he used to wrestle in the 50s or 60s. He says, "I don't. I shove in my fingernail, and I get the color that way." Butch come around and nailed him with the chain, no juice. Butch fucking pulled him back up off that apron and went right across his forehead. The blood went everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he laid down there. Now, at the end of the match, they carted him back on a stretcher to the dressing room. Smith was there, of course, running the show. This was all set up by Smith. You know what I mean? And that they got him to lay there, and he says, "Chief, keep your eyes closed." And he got a bottle of water. He said, "I'm going to get the doctor to get you something." And he's got this bottle, and he went into another room, pissed in it and all that sort of stuff. Come back, and he says, "You got to drink this and that. This will help you." And he's pouring it down. Keep your eyes closed. He's pouring it down the fucking Indian's throat. This is the sort of stuff Smith used to do.
Well, yeah, when I heard weird, I had never heard that weird before.
Oh, no, here's another one.
Oh, go on.
One more rib? Okay.
Yeah.
In the summertime, too, they always brought in midgets, you know, girls and boys.
Mm-hmm.
But those days, Little Beaver and Skyler Low, they were the top guys. Little Beaver was a raging fag. You know, he had a mohawk. I don't know whether you ever saw photos of Little Beaver.
Yeah.
Big lips and a mohawk, and Skyler Low, bald head. These were circus guys. They could walk along the top rope. They could do, you know, they didn't. it was like a stunt after a stunt. They worked, you know what I mean? And gave the people entertainment. They didn't try to work like big guys. They worked like midgets. Anyhow, it was a mixed tag, 2 girls from Moolah, one with a midget, and the heel with a midget, with Skyler Low, and the baby face with Little Beaver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those days, the girls wore one-piece suits, you know, like a beige suit or something like that, a one-piece suit. They do the spot where one midget, the baby face, does something to the heel, and the heel chases the midget around the ring, the circles. That's when the girl comes in, and Little Beaver goes between her legs, and Skyler Low is supposed to chase him, but the girl puts her hands up, and Skyler Low is supposed to stop. You know what I mean? And do the spot. Smith told fucking Skyler Low, gave him a blade, so Skyler Low didn't stop. He went between those girl's legs and shooting her base on and hit her right there in the crutch, right between the legs and the crutch. And they kept working, right? Now the blood was running through. All of a sudden, the front of the crutch went bright red in the beige outfit.
Oops, hang on. One sec.
You know, so we go back to the spot. You know, the midget's chasing the midget, right?
Mm-hmm.
Skyler Low goes between the legs. The Little Bee was supposed to chase him, and she goes like this. He's supposed to stop. He stopped, and he dropped on his knees and went between the legs and gigged her right up in the crutch. And they carried on working. That crutch became red, and that red she didn't know. And everyone's pointing. You know how tender the flesh is right up in your crutch there?
Yeah.
She didn't know. Now they're thinking she's having the period during the match. This is one of the ribs. This is one of the ribs that Smith would do.
Right.
So I got back in the car, and we drive back to the fucking hotel in Calgary. Fucking straight away. This is not the first time. As soon as I get them that, and and Stu knows we arrived, he rings me on the phone. What the fuck's going on? I got Moolah on the phone with me from South Carolina because her girls, and they're complaining about me. What happened to the girl? You know, Stu loved ribs, but he's being the tough guy here. You know what I mean? He's most probably laughing in the background, but he's saying, "What the fuck happened? What did you do this for?" You know what I mean? He knew that the midgets, he must have known that his son Smith had set it up and that, and the blood was in the crutch like that. Oh, that was like if you saw it in that beige outfit, like your top there, mate. That color.
Was it like this?
And the red in the crutch there, and everyone.
Goodness,
that's a heavy rib, right?
Yes, heavy flowing rib. Let me tell you.
Yeah, the ribs that those Smith did and those kids did were bloody heavy. God bless them.
Did you?
Dean is dead now, but Smith and Dean were the worst of those.
Did you ever get caught with or witness the Mabel Rib?
Yep, the Mabel. Yep.
Go on, give us.
You know about the Mabel Rib.
Give us the Mabel Rib.
Yeah, we had this guy that came in, and he came from Minneapolis, and superstar Billy Graham was big in Minneapolis at the time. The bow around his neck, the blonde hair, and the double biceps. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Remember superstar Billy Graham?
Yep.
Saw photos of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that he was a freak of nature at the time. And now this kid was just like him, and you know. And he went to the ring. It's like as soon as the bell rang, you know what I mean? But he had a great interview and a great thing. And after a week, the boys knew this. So they did the Mabel. You know, the town, they said on the way home, we were about 50 miles out of Red Deer, an hour out of Calgary. Said, we're going to stop at a friend's place on the way home. They're running a party there.
Right.
I guess you know the story. Anyhow, the party, it was a private place. They had a few girls there, and one of the girls came on to the guy. You know, there's only about 8 of us boys there, and that drinking. with about 5 girls and that, and one of the girls come on to the guy, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he thought he was getting lucky. They're getting late. She got him into the bedroom and she got him stripped down. She was in a bra and panties, or, you know, had clothes on, a bra on, and maybe a skirt on or jeans on still, you know, clothes on there. And they got her, and the guy stripped down. And that's when the guy came into the room and said, "What the fuck are you doing? That's my wife," with the gun, you know what I mean? And fired blanks. And the guy went right through the window and was never to be seen again. Never be seen again.
We'll move on to Portland. I'm sorry I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but you've got a lot of careers, so we've got to skip ahead. Don Owen stories, and also I was looking through the roster of Portland at this time, and you've got just some of the craziest dudes in the history of the business. Rip Rogers, Rip Oliver, Buddy Rose, Roddy Piper.
No, Rip Oliver and that crew wasn't there.
Oh.
The crew that when we came in there was most of us went to WWF in a period of time. So when we came in there, Snooker was just leaving, Jimmy Snooker. There was Buddy Rose there. There was Roddy Piper there. Cowboy Ron Bass. Edward Scousey, who became Colonel Blair's, but on AWA TV. Adrian Adonis, and a guy who sold out the business. He did a thing on television and told them it was a work.
Eddie Mansfield.
No, not Eddie. No, another guy at the time. I'm trying to think. He worked in Canada a lot too. This guy, Stu Hart.
Oh,
good worker.
Don't know.
Anyhow, they were all there. So the first week we're there. Adrian Adonis and this other guy had the belts, right? And Adrian and this other guy dropped the belts to us the first week we're there, or the second week we're there. They dropped the belts to us, and then the rest is history. You know, Roddy had left as a heel and came back as a baby face. We were in Hawaii starving at the time. We'd been working there for 3 months, living the life in Hawaii, going to the gym every morning early, and then flying out every night at 5 o'clock, and being back at 10 o'clock, being back on Honolulu, Waikiki again at 10 o'clock at night. We fly at 6. We work 5 islands a week, and we're living the life, laying on the beach all the day, going to the gym, but just keeping our head above water. And then Buddy Rose and Roddy Piper came in for a big show in Pearl Harbor. You heard of Pearl Harbor, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
With the Japanese bombs and that. And they worked on the big show, and they said they saw us work, and they says, "Oh, we need a tag team in Oregon." And they called Don Owens right there. Within an hour, we were talking to Don Owens, and we had a date for Northwest Championship Wrestling, Pacific Northwest Championship Wrestling, and so there you are. We had a date there, and what a territory! I mentioned the talent there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All those guys I mentioned went to WWF.
Yeah, I've got a list here for you. I've got a list here for you. Matt Bourne, Rip Rogers, Sal Martino, Johnny Mantell, King Parsons, Adrian Adonis, and Ron Starr, Dutch Savage,
Ron
Buddy
Starr.
Rose. Was Ron Starr
was the guy exposed the business in about 74.
Well, how did he do it? Did he just go to the papers?
TV or something or other. He exposed it. And that what a worker. Ron and Adrian were the champions. Excuse me.
So I should say that it's actually morning time. It's quite early in the morning for Luke to be up as well.
They had me up every morning. I've only had 4 hours sleep since Wednesday. 8 hours there. 4. In 3 days, I've had, I'd say, max of 12 hours sleep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be as interesting as I can be. I'll keep you up.
No. I'm going to be right after this break. I'm going to get right.
Okay. I'll ask about one more question, then we'll have a little break, and then we'll carry on. I'll bring up of all the names I mentioned there, Matt Bourne. When I was doing the podcast with Don Morocco, Don hated 2 people still out of wrestling, and that was it. Ole Anderson and Matt Bourne. What was it about Matt Bourne that used to rub everybody the wrong way?
Well, when he was young, he had a real hot head. You know, he was an All-American. like Buzz Sawyer.
Yeah.
An All-American was number one in one sport and number one in another sport. He was an amateur wrestler, best in the state, and a football player, one of the best in the state. That's an All-American. And his dad was Tough Tony Bourne, who had a reputation. Wasn't a big man, but he was tough. Tough Tony Bourne. He'd come in the dress room and introduce you and one of his moves, he'd come with your hand and hit you in the belly, and you could hear it all over the arena. And boy, that fucking stung. Tough Tony. I'm Tough Tony. You know what I mean? When he introduced himself. And Matt had that chip on his shoulder when he was younger. A beautiful guy, mate. But I worked with him when he was with his dad and he started in the business. Now, I could start on some stories that you wouldn't believe here, but I think we should take the break and come back to hook the people for the rest of the stories in Pacific Northwest, because these stories you won't believe that happened.
You heard the man. We'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, and we're back. And Bushwhacker Luke is going to tell us some great stories from Portland. So over to you, Luke.
Okay, mate. As I said before, Buddy Rose and Roddy Piper saw us in Pearl Harbor working, and they actually got us booked in there. We arrived now. The Rip Rogers, who became a great trainer for WWE or their training camp in Louisville, Kentucky. He had only worked one territory before, and he'd worked for the Poffos, and they taught him everything. Angelo Poffo, and there's Lanny Poffo, and of course the main one, Randy Savage. And so he'd been around them, and they taught him how to live on the smell of an oily rag. and Rip, he's got this that he blinks all the time. So there's a knock on. We move into the place called the Bomber. It's an old motels with a piece of land in the middle and little motel units all around this big little this field. And why it's called the Bomber? Because the gas pumps up the front, and under the gas pump, the gas pumps are set up the front. And on top of the gas pump, the guy that owns it bought the plane. He bought the plane that he drove and flew in World War II, an old bomber B-52. The whole plane sits above all the gas. There's about 16 gas, pumps there. So hence the Bomber. When they told us the Bomber, we said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You won't miss this fucking place, and you can't. Where do you see a B-52 sitting on gas pumps?" Anyhow, we're in this place. We met him. Now the first night we worked for them, and a week later we won the belts from Adrian the Star. Now Adrian was only 235 then. He was a great amateur wrestler, and Ron was a great worker too in the ring. And we won the belts, and then we worked against Stan Stasiak and Dutch Savage. Dutch Savage. They're two older guys. Stan had won the belt, or Bruno. Stan Stasiak had won the belt. He was a tweener. A tweener is the guy that they drop the belt to, and he passes on to the next guy. Usually has it for about a month or 2 months. And he had the WWF belt, and that for a couple of months. And he still carried the check that he got from Vince from the Gardens from the 60s in his wallet, the check stub. Anyhow, this is the territory you won't believe happened. Monday night was Salem, to something, a little town, Salem. It was in the theatre, just like in those theatres in England, where you go downstairs and the dressing rooms are under the stage, right? And that now Don Owens owned the territory, and his brother ran the southern parts of the territory, the southern parts from Portland down to the top of California. Oregon goes to California. He ran those towns, and Don ran the northern towns. and you got paid every night. Anyhow, we're down in the first place, Salem and that. This night, there's Adrian Adonis and all the boys are down there. And Elton was a drunk. He drank vodka in a clear glass, or was it gin? I don't know what it was. And he'd always have that. He was an he did a bit of boxing, amateur boxing. His nose was over like that. And he had a toupee, he had grey hair, grey toupee on his head. You know, it was well job and weaved in with his hair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It looked one piece. Anyhow, he comes down. He's always got a stoogie in his mouth, a cigar, and he down in the dressing room. He always, when he goes upstairs, he leaves a cigar on the table there. This is the first night we're there. Third night in the territory. As soon as he goes out that room, Adrian grabs that cigar, jams up his ass, twists it around, and puts it back on the table. Now, Elton, after the match, there's two things happened this night. This is the first night I work in Elton's towns. Elton has a 1 minute shoot. Did you hear about this, James?
No, I've never heard it.
He had an English guy too, Johnny Eagle.
Yes, I know the name. Yeah.
Yes, he started it with him. He had a shooter's trophy, 2 amateur wrestlers locked up, and he'd sit on the table. The trophy was about that high, maybe a foot, 9 inches a foot. And he had us in the dressing room. If you look salty enough and good enough, you had an amateur background, he would have guys do a minute or 2 minute shoot at the start of their match. You know what I mean? If they're amateurs, it'd be the first and second match. Now he didn't know that the referee was working in on this and that. Now we would have paid 20 for the winner, 10 for the loser. That was $30. But the boys would split $15 each. They'd go and work the shoot. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Now Elton would come out and fucking kneel on the floor and have his arms folded, and all you'd see on the apron was the chin and his arms folded, and he would watch that fucking shoot, right? The guys would knock up amateur style. You hook around the neck, amateur style, bent over, and they'd go, work the shoot, amateur style, round, takedowns and all that sort of stuff. And then when the minute or 2 minutes up, Elton give them the nod, the referee would tap them on the shoulder, they would break, and then they would lock up professional way. Can you believe this? This was every week, mate. Every week. Now, he would come back to that dressing room. The cigar story's hanging back now. He would come back to the dressing room. The boys we used to sneak and watch the shoot, you know what I mean? He'd come back, say Bob was working with Greg. He'd come back, I think Bob's got more points on him. He had more control. As soon as he said Bob, we'd go for Greg. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The opposite. And if it was a good shoot, we'd say, Elton, no, such and such and such and such. And then he says, okay, we'll bring him back as return. But the boys wouldn't want to come back as return. So we'd bump the money up to 20, to 30 and 20. So that's $50. This is on top of their pay. So now they got their $50, they're getting 25 each instead of 15 each. You understand? They'd come back in the next shoot. You know what I mean? The following week. This is how it worked. He'd come down and with all the boys used to work him. Now that shooter's trophy, he had his champion, and that was his glory. The boys broke it up, that thing up, and crazy glued it in places. And he used to come up and when the guy had a good shoot, he said, "You're my champion shooter." And that one of the boys would knock the table, the thing would fall to the floor or would break, and tears would come to his eyes. Because they'd pull it to pieces and put it with crazy glue. Anyhow, jumping from that story back to the old one, he'd come down to the room, pick a cigar up, and start walking around. Well, your next match, blah, 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 blah. What you going to do? He didn't know. The boys put it together, their matches together. Blah, blah, blah. I want you over. What's my brother doing? He didn't even know. He lives 100 yards away, his home from his brother, at a turkey farm, or 80 yards away. He never knew who the champions were or anything. He was a drunk. He'd have the cigar in his hand, walking around, and go to put up to his mouth, and and take it down again. Because every time he'd go to put it up, there's one of the boys would say, "Hey, help him," so it wouldn't get to his mouth. And we'd build it up like that, you know what I mean? And they'd go put it up again, blah, 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 you know what I mean? Then finally we'd let him to go, and he'd have it up to here, and he said, "Who the fuck shit in here?" He said, "Who's shit in here?" And he'd look around at all the boys, and then he'd put a stooge in his mouth, and he's smoking the shitty cigar. Now that's one story. This promoter came out, you know, he used to sell popcorn and drinks, and he had 7-Up or Coke. He had those bottles of Coke, you know, the big containers of Coke. He put it in the back of his pickup, or not pickup, it was a station wagon at the time. He'd have 7-Up, and he'd have Coke, or Sprite and Coke, and he'd have a gas bottle. The 2 containers he carried in his car, and you know, and he carried the money, and he had the popcorn machine, because he always had someone work that at night. So this night he came out of the car. This was before I got there, and he carried the money, and he had to put his hand into his pocket to get something, and he carried the revolver in his hand. He fucking finger hit the trigger of the gun, and the bullet went through his balls.
Jesus. Did it actually hit his balls, or just split them?
He shot himself in the balls. The only promoter had been known to shoot himself in the balls. Fucking, he was a drug. Now his first wife's name was Ali. He used to come down there and say, I said, "How you doing?" "Oh, good. My wife's good." And then funny part is though, the hair on the head is different than the hair on a pussy. I don't understand that. Different color. Big, but Hallie's got big tits. Anyhow, she died. Hallie died. And that he used to go to an RSL club, you know, Returned Servicemen's Club to drink, an old boys club, you know what I mean? To drink. Yeah. And they had a woman there too, of course, old woman. And I guess this older woman hooked up with him, Betty. Now, this Betty was a drunk too. You know what I mean? Now, Elton, at all of his little shows we used to do for him, he used to sit at the door at the end of the show because he liked the fans to pat him. "Good night of wrestling, Elton." But if at the end of a match, when we would finish our match, we used to get heat on the fucking guys. A fan would come out, "Elton, the heels are beating up, the heels are beating up the baby faces." He would rush to the ring and hop in the ring. "I find you 5,000, find you 5,000. And people would cheer and that, and it'd take all the heat off it. Anyhow, we come to this night, and we got Roddy handcuffed, or Ricky handcuffed. We worked with Roddy Piper and Rick Martel for 14 months into 4-mans. We fought Buddy Rose as our general. We always took an American to carry our flag because it put more heat on us, and the American always used to like it because it put more heat because he disowned his country. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Carrying a New Zealand flag. So this night we got heat and that on them and everyone's throwing everything in the ring. Fucking Betty comes out with a bucket and a mop in the middle of the match, hops in the ring, and she's mopping up the ring while we're wrestling. And she's screaming at the people, "Stop throwing stuff. These are good guys. We're getting heat." You know what I mean? Kicking the shit out. We got one guy handcuffed, got the other guy bleeding. You know, we have to put him in a hold and drag him over the corner. We're all hiding our faces while she's going around the ring, mopping up all the drinks on in the ring and screaming at the people. "These are good people. These are good people." This was fucked up. Shows you how it was fucked up. Anyhow, this night, he comes in the ring at the end of the night again to find us. Which says to me, grab hold of the bastard, because we used to do this. This was the only way we could draw in these towns, doing these angles at the end of the show, because we come back to these towns every week. So I grabbed them, and Butch grabs the belts and runs at him, and of course he sort of body tackles him, but swipes across his head. Elton goes down, his two-by twist, his glasses go to the floor, and he's laying there with his toupee twisted down there, and he rolls out and that. We grab the belts and we leave and go back to the fucking dressing room. Now we're all sitting in the dressing room because we all have to line up to go and get paid, right? No one wants. They know Eldon's in a fucking shitty mood because they said, "You guys are fired. You guys are fired." All the boys are saying this, and no one will go in first to get paid, right? Heels or babyface. No one was wanting to go in there first because they know it's going to be a shitty mood because he's always drunk at the end of the night. Butch says, "Fuck it, I'll go first." As soon as he walks into the door, he says, "Elton, one hell of a job you did. One hell of a job. But next time," Elton's trying to talk, "but next time, Luke is going to grab you. I'm going to run with the belts. You're going to duck down. I'm going to hit Luke, and he'll get the juice, and then you can do whatever you want." Oh, what a great idea, Butch. Here's $10 extra for good attitude. Now, you know, when you used to get blood in his matches, he used to ask you, "Was it the hard way?" Because he was an old shooter. "Was it the hard way?" He would always say, "Yeah, it's the hard way." "Oh, that's great. Here's an extra $10 to get it in the hard way." Fucking this. I could start telling stories about Elton walking down. He had his favorite suit jackets. There was next to, I'm sorry about going on here, but you can't believe these things. There was a place next to Portland called Pendleton, and that's where gabardine. You know what gabardine is?
No.
Cloth?
Oh, the material.
Yeah, material.
Yeah,
gabardine. Expensive. You know what I mean? And he got all the sports coats made there. And he had this checkered one he used to wear. Well, he had a few checkered ones he always used to wear. And as he come down with a new sports coat, he walk past you. The boys have a razor blade in their hand and go like that on the back of the sports jacket. Next week he'd come in and have another sports jacket on. And we'd say, "Where's your fucking grey, where's your checkered grey sports jacket? The white one." He says, "But I don't understand with that Pendleton Mills. They don't make them like they used to." And then I wait another couple of weeks and we do it to the next fucking jacket. Or as he walked past, the boys would blade the back of the jackets. And this could go, I was there for a year and a half. I must have gone through half a dozen sports jackets in a year and a half, all fucking stripped with blades at the back like that.
And the jacket didn't even do a hard way, so he didn't get $10 bonus.
No. And he used to look at you too, and he had $20, $10, $5 all stacked up. And he looked at where you were on the card, and he'd pull out the money, and maybe he put so many 20s there, and then he put a 10 there. And he'd look at you, take the 10 back and put a 5 there. And then he'd look at you, "Oh, no, you had a good match." He'd take that back and put another 10 and a 20. He played this money game in front of you when he's paying you. And hey, there's no one like this. You had to be there to see it, James. It was crazy guy, Elton Owens.
I'm going to move on now. We're going to go to Mid-Atlantic.
Sorry about that,
Oh,
mate.
Please, don't worry about it, mate.
That are unreal.
Oh, don't worry about it. Always more stories. I'm going to give you something else, though. Someone else, hopefully, you've got some stories on. You go to Mid-Atlantic, you and Butch defeat Buzz Sawyer and Matt Bourne, and I'm hoping for a wacky, crazy Buzz Sawyer story from you.
Buzz and Matt, we all stayed on Tuckasegee Road in Charlotte. It was in Howard Johnson, but it had apartments, buildings of apartments. Apartments was the bedroom, lounge, kitchen, and a balcony. And living next door to us was Matt and Buzz. Both of them all Americans, football and amateur. These two guys used to run to a town, drive into a town, they'd park on the side of the road, they'd get out of the car and wrestle each other on the side of the road. We'd pass them. Now we'd come home at night. He always had Corvettes, right? In a year, in about 9 months, I think he wrecked 2 cars. Just fucking being high and wrecked them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe they were rental cars, but they were always fucking sports cars, you know what I mean? Now at night they used to come home, we get fucking on the yin yang, the powder, and the next minute you'd be on the balcony. We'd be sitting on the balcony if it was a nice night. This is about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And next minute you see lights, you hear bang, 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 and you see all lights popping out in the parking lot. It was a big, big parking lot with poles everywhere. They pulled out the gun and bang, bang, be shooting lights. These two guys were wild.
Wow.
And in the ring, they used to slam you across the other side of the ring and come off the corner. And one guy would slam you and in the middle and come off and smash you. The other guy would put you way further. They always one tried to outdo the other. And it was, these two were wild and that. A lot of stories about Buzz in Florida too with the Briscoes. Pole matches, you know. The Briscoes were two rivers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jack and Jerry Briscoe, they ran the territory for Eddie Graham. And then on the road, and the pole matches with the coal miner's glove on top of the pole, they would grease the pole, especially if Buzz was up there. And he'd be going up there and get to the grease spot and go, yeah. And he'd keep going up again, yeah. Don Morocco, I think Don was there one time too, and they used to do high spots with him. You know what amyl nitrate is, right?
Yes.
Amyl nitrate.
I've
It gives
read
you a
about
good
it.
whack when you have a sniff of it. Well, they got it in hospitals. They got the capsules like that. They break it, put under your nose if you start going down in hospital. Well, the guys used to get those fucking capsules and that. And I hear this night they run Buzz in a high spot, the Briscoes. Bing, 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 bing on the ropes. And then finally Gerald or Jack, as he came across, hooked him and took him down in a small package, but wrapped him up like his body's folded like this in the ring and put amyl nitrate up his nose and folded him up when he was blown out of air. And they said, you should have seen the arms and legs. He went insane. You know, they did shit like this to Buzz. Buzz could take it, but at the time, Buzz was wild.
I was going to say, it sounds like he didn't really need any more encouragement in that department anyway.
No, you know what he died on? He died, you know what Elvis died on? Placidos, right? You heard of Placidos?
I've heard of Placidos, yeah. It's all barbiturates and stuff, just too much over many years.
Placidos were a painkiller that Elvis died on too.
Yeah.
That's why he got bloated up. So, man, if you take a lot of painkillers, your body doesn't let out, the back end doesn't work, it blocks up, you know what I mean? And you get bloated like Elvis said. Buzz was on Placidos in the end. He'd take them after a match and you're in a restaurant or anything or other, the next minute his face was in his food. They were capsules and it was thick sort of black molasses in the capsules. They were deadly, Placidos. Well, killed Elvis.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to Mid-Atlantic, I think shortly after your arrival, Ole Anderson takes over as the booker. So whenever someone's ever worked under Ole Anderson or with Ole Anderson, I always ask their impressions of and what they thought of Ole as a booker and as a worker.
Now, he wasn't working there. I never had him in Charlotte. I had him the first time there. This is 1981.
Yeah.
I was sent. Jimmy Snuka was sent from Pacific Northwest. All those promoters like Stu Hart, Crockett Senior, Vince Senior, they all worked together, especially those three. And we all got sent. Snuka went first down there to NWA out of Charlotte. Then we were next. Then Roddy come after us. So we're all in Charlotte and there. And working there, and Ole wasn't there at the time. Gene Anderson was in the office. Ole was in Atlanta. You know what I mean? Running a company in Atlanta. And we used to go to Atlanta, of course, to do TV at Ted Turner Studios, but nothing to do with Ole. You know, I met Ole later when I went in, and I came back to do television in Atlanta, and Ole was doing the television. Ole was a screamer. If something went wrong in the ring, he wouldn't pull you back into his office and tell you. He would fucking dress you down in front of all the boys. Bill Watts and him were both screamers that fucking tore you up to pieces. He was a great worker, though. Ole was a great worker. He did have a variety of stuff, You never had a need a variety of stuff those days because you worked the whole. You worked the people. You didn't do move after move after move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got the people involved deeply. That's the way you drew those big houses. And Oldie was a great mathematician. Hence the Four Horsemen. You know, he was the body of that. Then he brought in fucking Tully. Then they brought in Arn. You know, Barry Windham was always a good worker. You know, he was from his dad onwards. He was supposed to be made world champion, NWA world champion, early 80s. He's supposed to take it off Harley before Flair and that. But Barry, too, he was wild, too, at those days. You know what I mean? Fast cars, wild woman, and all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Excuse me, mate. Carry on.
Okay, no worries. I think one of the most famous territories that you visited is Puerto Rico, and I do a weekly podcast with Dutch Mantel, and he tells me quite a few stories about the fans, and one thing he always says about Puerto Rico fans were they thought the moon landing was fake and wrestling was real. And have you ever heard that line before? And just the fans...
What? Say it again, mate.
Puerto Rico fans, they thought that wrestling was real and the moon landing was fake.
Yeah, exactly, mate. I've got scars on my shoulders from fans. I've been in court twice in lawsuits where I had to grab the fan and drag him to the security, and that who fucking knifed me or sliced me. You know what I mean? It was wild. Hugo Sabinovich was our manager there in the 70s. Car got turned over on its side. Fucking many times the squad, what's it called, the vice squad, or the guys in leather jackets with Uzis had to come, put us in their car, take us outside the city, and that where our car would be waiting to get us so we go back to San Juan. Lost Bus Stories had superheat there. And the first time we went there was 80, and that Dutch came in, he jumped Harley Racing, or he jumped Carlos Colon. It was a big Christmas show. The anniversary show was a big show every year. This is where I met Dutch. Fucking Carlos had the figure 4 on Harley Race for the NWA World Champion, and Father Christmas jumped in the ring and fucking stopped the shit out of Carlos Colon, pulled his mask and the wig off and all that stuff, and it was Dutch Mantel. Dutch had worked down there as a tag team, actually with fucking fucking good mate of mine. So it's still one of the longest in that. The Elvis guy, fucking Roy Farris, Wayne Farris.
Oh yeah, Honky Tonk Man.
The Honky Tonk Man. Lathan was supposed to come down there and he didn't, and Honky come down as Dutch's partner, and that was in the late 70s or mid 70s, because they didn't open until 75, 78, 79, and they were a hot tag team, but more of a wrestling tag team, blood every night, but more. Then when we came in, we were a vicious tag team. You know what I mean? Violent. I'm going to have a sip of this, and I'll tell you our first encounter in Puerto Rico.
Well, when you have a sip of this, I'll ask you one more thing. First encounter with Puerto Rico, of course, but can you remember let's say, the oddest thing that the fans threw at you, or the hardest thing that fans threw at you?
Yeah. Spark plugs were a big thing, especially in Ponce. You've heard the name Ponce. We had some major riots there, and there wasn't a back door to get out. You had to go through the arena to get out the front door. They would never open the back doors. First night in Puerto Rico, we hadn't been in any shows yet. Carla, and they're taping this night. Carla said, I'm going to be signing in the front of the house from 7:30 onwards. I have a table and all people buying a ticket. They got a photo from me. He said, when you come in the front doors, split your flag. We had a flagpole, and it wasn't fucking light. It was steam pipe. You know what steam pipe is?
No, is it solid all the way through?
Like the old pipe, water pipes in houses.
Right.
You know that solid pipe?
Yeah.
Before they put the plastic, or whatever it's called, not plastic, what they use now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, and we had a thing in the middle where you could unscrew it and split in half. He says, come through there, split your flagpole, and lay me out. And we did, you know, we knew juice and that, but and bleeding and that. But we came in, pushed through those people and fucking whacked them. And he said, make it look like real. And that, you know, a steam pipe is heavy. But, you know, we still work with it, but we swang it and beat him up. The blood went all over the walls everywhere. Fucking the ambulance, and then the guy with us took our bags, went through. We never, you always come in the back way, but he said, you guys come the front way because you've never been here before. And we did this job on him, and he was carried out. The final match that night was Carlos and Invader. You know, you've heard of Invader.
Yeah, Invader, Jose Gonzalez.
Dutch was there for that incident in 1988, which he's most probably told you about a lot of times.
Yeah.
Dutch and me are pretty close. We were in territories and bookers, joint bookers. Did you know that?
No, I thought he was booker for is it the IWA when you were in Cologne's one? Is that not true?
No. We go back now in 1981. There's no other promotion there. This is Cologne, right. WWC. And that night we do the thing where you know, we're in the ring and Invader comes out and you know, we said the announcer said, no, you can't work, you need a partner, get someone from the back and that, you know, they're working. So he says, no, Carlos was my amigo, and that I settled. Invader say, I settled this problem. And he's talking in Spanish too. I settled this problem. So we start the match, and then finally he's shining on both of us. We're tagging in and out. Finally, we get him down, and you know, they cut right through the mask. And he always wore a white mask, so the fucking thing was red. And next minute, he looks like, and he's crawling to his corner. We drag him back and beat him up. Next minute, an ambulance pulls us through the front of the building, and that in the front of the building, and fucking Carlos comes out of that with a fucking big baseball bat or something around an axe handle, and he does the walking. Remember the walking tall? The shit.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Rupert Posser comes into town and cleans house. That was it. We took 2 shots. You know, we didn't give the people much. We took 2 shots each. One in the stomach, bent over. One on the back, rolled out. The people wanted us to get our ass kicked, but we got out of Dodge, and that was that. That was our first night in Puerto Rico. And then the fucking house went insane when Carlos come out of that ambulance, all bandaged up, and the blood comes through the bandage and all that. Anyhow, lots of incidents. Cars turned over there. Going out of the stuff, you know, at the front of the arenas, the ballparks, we used to, on the big shows, used to sell out, you know, in the 20-something, 24,000 and that in the baseball parks. Fucking out in the front, the guys would be selling limes. You know what a lime is?
Yeah.
Small lemon, but green, about that size.
Yeah. I drink a lot of Corona. I drink a lot of Corona, so I've always got some in my Corona.
Yeah. Oh, you like Morona to scream when you squeeze that lemon. Anyhow, they sold bags like this of limes. People used to buy those bags, and at home plate, the ring would be inside the home plate. These guys could throw over the net and get in the ring. The Puerto Ricans, Dutch told you how fucking they are with throwing stuff, didn't they?
Oh yeah,
they could hit you from a mile away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he told me that once somebody threw a dildo at him.
Yeah, they throw anything at you. They throw anything at you. You know what I mean? Anything they get their hands on, and that Ponzi, like that. This night we rolled them. I did a few heavy things. I did a crucifixion. And I then Dutch didn't like the blood but get nuts. Always his partners had to get juice. And then we're talking about the 80s now. But anyhow, I came back. I worked there in 81, and then in 84 I came back as booker for Carlos Colon. And that's when we had the biggest house ever. We did 40,000 people on that island. but we had 2 other towns hooked up with the fucking screens in the buildings, and we did 25 in the ballpark, or 24, and we did 10 here and 6 in the other building, and then on big screens. And that's when we did the thing where Carlos got his neck broken by Brody and Hanson, and he was looking for a partner, and the only guy he thought of was his enemy, the guy that he'd been working with since 75, his worst enemy, Abdullah. And we did a hell of an angle, him meeting Abdullah. I don't know whether you heard of that angle. We did it in Texas, in a big house with a houseboy and a suitcase full of money. Where Carlos came and knocked in the houseboy and wouldn't get Abdullah. And finally, he paid Abdullah, and then Abdullah never talked or anything or other. And Abdullah came and worked as his partner, but not from the same dressing room. We had to get another dressing room, a prefab dressing room on the ballpark, and Abdullah come from it. But that's when we did the big house. You know what I mean?
How over was Abby in Puerto Rico? I've heard it's like there and Japan were his 2 biggest territories.
Yeah, he was over. He was the killer. He was the man. The heel. Brody was too, but Abby came in more. Abby came in more than that, but Brody was over too. And the reason of the 2, we're going to move on in a minute. I wasn't there when Brody got killed, but I was in WWF. But I was just with Brody's wife recently. Brody's wife is the Kiwi, you know that?
Oh,
Barbara.
Really? No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Barbara's the Kiwi. I gave her a plaque at a show too. Everybody, Brody's not forgotten about, mate. Brody's still living in that. And you know how many years it is? It's 33 years.
Yeah, was it
34 years since he's 88.
Yeah, 88. Well, I mean, since you've brought it up and everything, we'll talk about it a little bit then. I know you weren't there at the time, but can you talk about Jose Gonzalez? Was he always the type who could kill somebody? And also talk about Bruiser Brody as a person and as somebody who could wind up promoters.
Bruiser Brody was one hell of a hand. When you put him on the card and you had a good opponent, even if you didn't do an angle, and you had a hot heel or a hot baby face, and that put Bruiser Brody with him, and the house would be sold out. You know what I mean? But now Frank, I lived in San Antonio a year and a half, and then he lives in Brooksville, 30 or 25 miles out, and now he worked for me a lot. Plus he worked for Fritz out of Dallas. Bruiser Brody had no ties with anyone. He would go and do an angle in St. Louis, Missouri, St. Louis was a big wrestling town in the 80s, the 70s. He would go up to Bourne in Minneapolis, because Bourne did all big towns, you know what I mean? And Winnipeg, Minneapolis, Denver, all those. He'd do an angle there. He'd do an angle for me, angle for Fritz, you know what I mean? And then he would play one promoter against the other for this. And I had him booked in double shots. Sundays were always a double. Down in the valley on the Mexican border, we would get 2,500 in a park. In the 80s, in a spot show, 2,500, fucking good crowd. And then we'd do the Hemisphere in San Antonio at night. We'd do a double shot. You know what I mean? We'd have a private plane and fly between the both. We'd have workers in both towns. They just the tag team and the single would fly, you know what I mean, in and out. And Frank effed me with that. Done an angle with him on which was showed on the Saturday for the Sunday, and I built up it, and then did the heavy angle, and he no-showed me. And those towns were dead. Well, we got San Antonio back, but down in the valley on the Mexican border, and maybe it took me 6 to 8 months to get from 2,000 people to 400 people. That's how it hurt you, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Did it stop you from ever trying to book him again?
Huh?
Did it stop you from ever booking Bruiser Brody again?
No, he had to use it. No. Him and Abby were sellouts, automatic. In Texas, he was a babyface because it was his hometown. And Abby and him in Texas, just put the names on the card, building sold out, you know what I mean? because they knew it was going to be a wild, bloody match. Both of them. That was Frank. Frank was that was the only place he was babyface. Now, getting to his death in Puerto Rico, he'd been there so much since in the 70s and that people would love to see him because they knew he could beat up people. But now they were starting, the other heels came in and started knocking him, and he had that semi-babyface feel. People wanted him now to beat up the top fucking heels, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they knew, when he became babyface, he was going to switch. He was going to work like a heel still. A lot of people, when they switched to baby faces, like we did, we changed our style then completely. You know what I mean? Which is not good, really. But it was two different companies. One was the Southern company, and one was the Northern company. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So we changed completely. But Frank stayed the same. You know what I mean? He came out, and people wanted to see him work like a heel against a heel, and that's what was happening in Puerto Rico. And Carlos Colon was God there, you know what I mean, from day one. And Vader was number 2 on the ladder. But Frank got over completely as a babyface, and Vader would be pushed right down, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because this is a big man. And Vader was 5'10", 215 pounds, you know what I mean? 215 pounds. Here's a guy 6'4", 6'5", 270, 280 that came out of that dressing room, swinging that chain. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You know what I mean? And that machine went to the end of the match. He was the machine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the one reason too. And the other reason too, we heard that, over a period of time, Carlos had percentages of the house he hadn't got. He was owed a bit of money, you know what I mean? And they were going to give him part of the action there in Puerto Rico. And that's what I heard, what went down, And Vader had a chip on his shoulder too, Frank, that I heard. Now, this is third party. Frank was brought in by Vince Sr. in 77 or 78 to get over. And when Frank goes in the territory to get over, he chops meat.
Yeah.
Now, the Invader was working for WWF, and he was in the middle of the card. He was beating the guys on the bottom. He was in the middle, putting the guys over, semi-final and final guys, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that Brody came in, and he was given to him on one of those shows, and it was in New Jersey, and Frank came in and chopped meat, beat him up, didn't let him breathe. And Invader, Puerto Rican, Boricua, Boricua was a Puerto Rican fighter.
Yeah.
He got that blood in him, You know how the Latins love to fight, blood, and they get riled up fast. You haven't been around many, I don't think, but I
am one. I am Latin, basically. Well, I'm Spanish anyway, so yeah.
You got a temper?
Not really, no. I think it's been beaten out of me. I was never that good at fighting.
You've heard about it, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And all those boxers, all those middleweight boxers, they were all Latin, Dominican, Haitian, Puerto Rican, a lot of Puerto Rican champions, Mexican, Panama, Ecuador.
Cuba.
Yes, fucking the Olympic Games. Fucking Cuba won medals in boxing. Yeah, so they fire up and fucking get mad. When you get mad, you throw, you're wild.
Does I'll ask this then. Does do you think that it was premeditated, the murder? Do you think this was planned days in advance? Did Carlos have anything to do with it as far as suggesting?
I can't say a word there, mate. And I'm not laying back at that. I don't talk out on hearsay about other people. Facts, you got to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Dutch was there. He was in that room, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in the locker room.
Or was he in the heels dressing room?
I'm not sure he was in the locker room. I think I think he said before that he was taking a walk around the arena because he said he felt something was happening.
Yeah, and then taking a walk in the arena, but such as shrewd, such as a very smart businessman. He said that, of course, to get him out of the picture instead of being pushed to give an answer. Am I right there?
I don't know.
Dutch now from doing interviews, he's very smarter to the business. And if he says I'm taking a walk around the arena, that puts him out of that situation. But Tony was there.
Yeah, Tony Atlas.
Tony was there. Tony came in and picked him up and carried him out from the shower. Vader disappeared, and came back all showered and cleaned up, and that's to do the last match was Timmy's last match.
A crazy situation.
It's a crazy situation.
Yeah.
And the knife was never seen. But he went in. They said he had a towel wrapped around his arm. This is a fact. I heard it from 3 different guys who were in that dressing room. He had a towel around his arm, and that something was in. It had to be in the towel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you have a towel wrapped around your arm?
Exactly.
You have a towel usually hanging over your shoulder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's all sort of tying together a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know. I work with Jose after that. I was in the WWF then, but when I got out of WWF, I come back there as baby faces, turned heel. They never had a house over 12,000 after Brody killed in '88. You know that?
Yeah.
No, Ray Gonzalez got one house. They did a big thing on Ray Gonzalez with somebody who was a big name down there, and they got a 12,000 people house. I came back and I went into Carlos. I says, "We'll come in for 6 weeks. I'll do a turn heel again from being a Bushwhacker, turn heel again, and work against invaders in a cage match, and it will come back in a death match for anniversary." So in the cage match, I did a crucifixion. And in the end, I actually knocked folks. We tied Invader 3 up, and Invader 1, we tied him against the cage like this with barbed wire around his arms and around his body, through the middle, through the cage, and he's like that. And of course, he's got a mask on, there's blood coming from the mask, and he's like crucified. And then we did the interview on a grave, and we had a grave beside it, and it had the head. We had a headboard made, a plaque to go on the grave, which we used double-sided tape, and we put on there, and it had his parents' names.
Oh.
And Puerto Rico's a Catholic country.
Yeah.
Religious, and we stood on that grave and did the interview. How's that? And we did from 12,000, the house come up to maybe 20,000. They hadn't had a house since Brody died, and that was 10 years after Brody died.
We will move on. We've got a little under 20 minutes left, so I'll ask you. I'm going to try and get as many questions in before our time is up. And one thing I am going to ask you about is,
don't we carry on mañana?
Oh yeah, we're going to carry on tomorrow. So this is a huge one as well. So we've got tons more questions to go for. But for now, I'm going to ask you Robert Fuller and Ron Fuller stories. You were in Southwest Championship Wrestling for a brief period.
Right.
Everyone's got a Robert Fuller story.
Right. What a territory. You're home every night. The longest, Birmingham was the longest, 200 miles, 3.5 hours there, 3 hours back. And then, Ron and Robert. This is the territory. And Jimmy Golden, who's their cousin. You heard of Jimmy Golden?
Yep.
He worked as Buckhouse Bunk in WCW.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert was the manager. He was the colonel. Remember that?
Yeah, Colonel
Dickie
Robert
Slater,
Parker.
Dickie Slater and Buckhouse Bunk with the tag team with the cousin Robert as that. The their real name is Welshers. They're all Welshers. And then we got over there. They heard about us and what we'd done in other territories. So we did the same as we did on other territories straight away. And they went to fire us. Jimmy Golden's father was the commission. He was in the 70s. They all knew him in the territory. He came in and said, "You fire." Before he could get the words out, we grabbed him, put him in the ring, and gave him the coal miner's glove with the flag over his head. He gagged, hospitalized, and bang, we were on fire. Now this territory, Robert would book for 6 months, and then Rob would come. Robert would book for 6 months, and then he would go out. Then Ron would come in. So when Robert was there, it was Robert and Jimmy Golden as the tag team. You know what I mean? So all the time we worked there, we worked with Robert and Jimmy Golden. We worked with Ron and Jimmy Golden. We worked with Robert and Ron, and we worked with the Armstrongs. That's all. The only people who worked in 18 months there. Now the Armstrongs, that was Brad and Dad. Brad was a piece of talent that never was used right, on WCW.
Yeah.
He was a laid-back guy, very humorous in the dressing room, but he'd come over when he talked quiet, but they never gave him the right gimmick, you know what I mean? But what a hand in the ring. He was a panther, you know what I mean? Robert and Bob, Dad and that son, magic in the ring, and Drew. And we drew there all the way through. Ron on his podcast says we never got the second run with them because they went to higher places. Then we went to bigger territories than the Vince McMahon. He says we popped the territory wide open because they never had two guys that were blood. Now Butch was back home at the time, and I had Jonathan Boyd, the Royal Kangaroo, with me.
Yeah,
and John was hated in the dressing room, so you can imagine how the fans thought of him. The boys hated him. He had that chip on his shoulder because in Australia, he was from Australia, right?
Right.
The Royal Kangaroos, and in Australia, they were job guys like me. When I said all the Americans come in, they beat us in 3 to 5 minutes. But when John came over to the States, he beat all the Americans. He let them know, you know what I mean? I'm the man here, and it doesn't matter how. John wasn't big, 5'9", but thick, 225, but he worked. It was very good psychology and interviews. Fuck, he knew how to rip people's minds up. He could do an interview and get a fucking old woman when a fucking comes with the television and fight you. Country-wise, he had knife, what do you call knife jabbing interviews, whatever you like to call it, interviews that got to your heart and made you fucking mad, you know what I mean? Because he could belittle you within a minute, you know what I mean? Now Robert, Wild, you heard about Robert and that Ron was a Texas stud, but Robert had the rope between his legs.
Yeah.
You heard that, right?
Yeah, I've heard that many times, yeah.
We'd be out to intermission. We'd always be either the last match or if we had a big name in as a single, the single would be the last match or we'd be the last match. You know what I mean? The tag. Mainly the tags were, unless they brought a single in, like the world champion, and for a week, and and Ron would come back in if Robert was booking and work against Ric Flair in the territory. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, Robert, nowhere to be seen. And then intermission, he would come in, he would go to the sink, he would hang that rope in the sink, wash his hands and come to the ring. Robert would, what a guy in the ring too. When he fired up, mate. There's stories and the parties that Ron and Robert had for the boys. Every year they had a couple of parties for the boys. And they were, did you ever hear about the parties?
No, I've never.
The little secret packages all over the house and that, with the little helpers in the packages.
What was it, like an Easter egg hunt? You had to find them all over the place.
The Easter egg hunts and that, and the packages. And that, they were great parties. I'm talking back now in 1980. I'm talking about 42 years ago.
Do you know, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to skip through. I'm going to give you maybe 2 or 3 more questions, see how much we get through. One thing I didn't know about you is I may have said Southwest Championship Wrestling for the Fuller territory. I think I might be wrong there. But was Southwest the Joe Blanchard territory, excuse me, when you had a feud with Tully?
Tully Blanchard from the Four Horsemen, that was his dad's territory. And then they said that territory needs someone. They said it's a bad shape. And Joe was an old promoter, a big name in the South and even Central America, right up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now, Joe was completely hip, and he used to drag that side of his body. And when he walked, he was bent over. He'd stand up and drag, and stand up, when he's walking. He was slow on dragging one side of his body. Anyhow, we blew it open because we did the same thing that I just told you about with that last territory. We did the same thing with Joe.
With Tully, I hadn't realised. I was looking through some match listings, and it says that you once wrestled him in a scissors on a pole match. How do you work with scissors?
To get scissors off and cut the guy's hair off.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I thought it was like zipping him.
No. That was to fucking cut the guy's hair off. You got to get up the pole and that. The babyface always gets the pole. The heels do a double. We usually do a move where it's a double knocker or something, and you got the referee back to the pole, and the heel always has another heel come out and run up and drop the scissors in the ring, or you get a chick with a short skirt and a tee back on to go up that pole. You know what I mean? A heel chick with a skirt, the tee back on, and she gets up that pole, and everyone's fucking screaming, seeing that ass and all that. And that's how you get the scissors down for the heel.
How was Tully then? This is pretty young in his career, but how was Tully as someone considered one of the all-time greats in the ring at one point?
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah. Tully was a mathematician. He was brought up, from his dad working, and now he was a great football player, mate.
Yeah.
A quarterback. You know what a quarterback is?
Yep.
He's the main guy in the team. It gets the ball and throws it to the wide receivers or throws it to the fullback. He was a quarterback. Then he had that shoulder injury, and it fucked him up, and that was his football career gone. Otherwise, they say he would have been a pro. He was that good, he would have been a pro.
What makes him that great as a wrestler, though? So what did he have that other wrestlers didn't?
He knew, he thought, moves. He didn't do moves. He would work a hold, let him work up and do a high spot, and then he'd come back, cut the heel, cut the baby face, and work the hole. Quick tags. He just had psychology. You know what I mean? Great psychology for the ring.
Absolutely.
Tully. And he had a great partner too when he was in the early 80s. Gino Hernandez that killed early, the half-breed.
Yeah.
I forget what his nickname was.
No, that was it, the handsome half-breed.
Yes, they were the great tag team. Yeah, Tully was over. Tully was over in that dad's territory. Well, you got to be if you're a good worker. And he didn't have to get pushed by his dad. Well, he wasn't pushed. His dad made him work for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he'd been working since in the 70s.
With that, we'll move 2 more. I'm going to give 2 more questions for you because these are the 2 that I really want to know about. There's 1,000 really, but you were in Mid-South at one point in the 86, 87. That was a snake pit of tough guys like Jim Duggan, Dick Slater, Dr. Death, guys like that. In the Mid-South territory, if you were walking into a bar and you had 3 Mid-South wrestlers with you to look after you, who would you pick and why?
Dick Slater.
Is that all you need?
Dick Slater was a brawler. Well known. You heard that?
I've heard the Sting's head in the toilet story a few times.
Yeah, but not only that, he could fight. Now, here's a guy who had buggy whip legs. You know what a buggy whip is?
Yeah.
You know, a pacer or a trotter. You sit in that buggy behind it, and you got those long reins to the horse, and you got that buggy whip, that long whip that you whip the horse with.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 8 feet long, that long buggy whip, because you sit way back. Well, he had Dickie Murdoch had buggy whip arms and legs. And he had a pot belly, and he could go for an hour in the ring. They would have made him a world champion, but he could make a match or he could make a clown of a match. You know what I mean? He could hold a straight face and tell jokes and make everyone laugh in that ring. But the fans wouldn't know, but he would make everyone laugh in that ring. You know what I mean? And he'd look like straight as anything, but verbal shit he would say. You know what I mean? Dickie, you know, when I was in the Southwest, mate, that was my chance. I had a Mexican. Texas is full of rednecks and Mexicans, right? Mm-hmm. I had Manny Fernandez and Dick Murdoch as a tag team. We had a wild Mexican and a fucking redneck, Captain Redneck. Dickie, I worked with. Now, Mid-South, he was a heel. This is James, I'm going to shoot off. I'm in Puerto Rico. And, when I worked for Jerry Jarrett, my good friend who I met in 65, Bill Dundee, he used to come over to New Zealand, and I would go to Australia and club wrestling before the Americans. And then he used to come over as an American. We used to bring Australians over and call them Americans. And that, so I know him from 65, and that he's the booker for Jerry Jarrett in 81. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And 82. So now he'd left there, and in 83, he'd gone and worked for Mid-South. He'd bought Midnight Express in, and then 3 months later, he bought Rock and Roll Express, right? Mm-hmm. They did some booming houses. They broke records and figures and that because they did angles that no one had seen before. The stupid stuff, but it sold out because no one had seen any of that stuff because that was always a big man territory, right? Mid-South. And now they were wrestling. He called me up in Puerto Rico. I was booking for Carlos Colon. And he says, we need a booker here. I'm leaving. And I've told Bill about you. And he's seen me. He's heard about the houses you're drawing down there. We'd like you to come as booker there. He's got Bill on the phone. And Bill said, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'd love to. Because I know Mid-South is big money. And I said, yeah, I'd love to come in there. I said, but I've got to finish off these angles. I got 2 months, 10 more weeks work. You know what I mean? Here, I got to blow off this other angle I've got with these other people. And of course, my angle. And how my angle is going to go, I'll blow the other one off first, then blow my one off, turn someone babyface to heel or heel to babyface so they can carry on the territory. So Bill left, and they put Dickie Slater as the intern booker in between, the tweener. I arrived there, and they say to me, are you ready to take over? And I says, well, you're going to get rid of Dickie? I know him from Florida, going back in 1980. And they said, you're going to get rid of Dickie because you don't have the next booker there because they can fuck the territory. They hate someone else coming on top of them. And I said, no. They said, no, we want to keep Dickie. And they kept asking me for a month. And I said, no. They said, no, we're going to keep Dickie. So you know what they did? They bought Ken Mantellin out of fucking Fritz's territory, out of what was Fritz's territory called?
WCCW, World Class.
World Class, yeah. World Class Wrestling. And he brought all his fucking talent in too, like the Freebirds and everyone else. So anyhow, we'd already started at an angle. The two guys were the Fantastics. I gave Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers. I gave Bobby Fulton his first main event match in Tennessee, in Texas, a scaffold match against Eric Emery. And Bobby Fulton got over. We got him over in Texas. So now he's teamed up with Tommy Rogers. And they were like the Rock and Roll Express, wrestlers and that. But they hadn't worked against a Blood and Guts team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Blood and Guts team. We turned those 30, 210, 205 pounds, but with big hearts, we turned them into fighters, and we drew. You may have heard how good we drew there.
Yeah.
And then in the end, we went into, lumberjack matches. Then we went into cage matches. Then we went into barbed wire. Bull Watts got a barbed wire cage match. And we started going, this is a big territory, mate. From New Orleans, which is right on the water, and then right up to fucking Kansas City, St. Louis. You know how far that is up, right?
Pretty far.
That's a long way up. And right across, so many states. We'll run all those states and that. So we were doing these barbed wire cage matches, and I find out that, now I didn't take the book for a start, which was bad. And now Kenny Mantell, he's put a flag bearer with us, an American, which was Jack Britton, which was good, you know what I mean? It was a heel, and we always said, look, we've got an American under our flag. And as we used to say, how do you like being under the flag? He said, the best. Before I was having a losing career, and now every night we've got to have hands raised, even though he was a flag bearer. He felt part of the action. But then he put a girl with us, Mad Maxine, 6'2", with a big mohawk.
Yeah, Fabulous Moolah's girl, wasn't she?
Was she broken by Fabulous Moolah?
I thought she was, yeah.
I didn't know. She wasn't a worker. She was a valet.
I'm going to have a
Mad
look.
Maxine.
I'm going to have a look at that.
Have a look at this girl.
Yeah, I think I know the one. Yeah, there we go. I can't actually. I'm Googling it so you can see there. There's Mad Maxine. That's on the screen. Oh, that's on the screen now, by the way, so everyone can see.
Yeah,
there we go.
And Mad Maxine. And now she couldn't understand why these two little guys at 205. She said, I could beat these two guys up myself. She didn't realize it was the work. You know what I mean? And she used to say, fuck, why are we doing the job? Now, what's the name has got 4 of us against the 2. He's thinking that we're going to lose fucking strength, drawing power, and all that sort of stuff. We got and we were doing jobs in the cages that we were getting stronger. We never laid there and sold. We were heels that would get beaten, but we're back on our feet wanting to fight, you know what I mean? And register. We never laid down. We registered as heel. Took a blow and came back fighting, took another blow, you know what I mean? And that we got harder because we've got 2 Americans under the New Zealand flag and saluting to it. So all of a sudden that gave power. Anyhow, we're doing these barbed wire cages around the country. We've done about 30, something like that already, but we have so many more to do because Bull Watts had a big fucking area, you know what I mean? And we're doing them as spot shows too. And anyhow, this day, payday, and the Freebirds got paid, and I saw a check laying down there, and I saw what was on the check. The Freebirds were working against the team, but, we were doing a foreigner, New Zealanders, and we had the USA chart, the whole fucking thing going, and everyone was bringing USA flags to the shows and that. And the Freebirds were working before intermission, and I saw their check compared to my check. And we were getting blood and guts. We were doing blood. We're all, every night. Our head was like it was like shredded cabbage. Every night, ding, 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 ding. Bobby or them had staff. Every night you had to wash your fucking head with alcohol. To keep fucking thing. And I saw that, so I did a no-show. I said to Butch, I told Butch. He says, "Fuck it, we're not going. Let's see what happens." Fucking straight away, JR. Grizzly was the road agent. JR was Jim Ross was the right-hand man for Watts. They called me straight away and they says, Bill said you can have 500 every night as soon as you get to the arena. And I says, hey, why weren't we getting that before? And then they said, we now. And I knew, the 500, as soon as they wanted to finish us, they'd fire us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to take us to pay that $3,500 a week. Sometimes Sundays we did 2 shows. You know what I mean?
So pretty good payday.
Yeah, we were making around 2,000, and I saw something 2,900 for the Freebirds, and they weren't even, they didn't even have a heavy angle going or nothing. You know what I mean? And that was it.
I will give you one more question, then we'll shut the podcast down, and this will be super quick. Johnny Ace, as your flag bearer in Jim Crockett Promotions, Where did he come from?
Cheers, mate. Cheers, people. I'm just going to wet the billy goat, wet the throat.
Well, so I'll talk over this while you're having a good drink. Is John Laurinaitis, of course, as we record this, has been fired by WWE, but one of his first breaks in wrestling was that John was the flag bearer for the sheep herders.
We actually broke Johnny in. I had to get that down my billy goat, mate, my throat.
No worries.
It was getting a bit dry anyhow. Dusty was very shrewd. Dusty knew. Dusty's son was given to us in a tag match against Rock and Roll, and it was his first time he ever went to the ring. Now I'm talking about Dustin as the referee. This is up in Amarillo, and he said, "Listen to Luke, and he'll tell you what to do in the match. We're working against the Rock and Roll." He said, "Luke and Ricky, Robert will tell you what to do." That's how he started, Dustin. Anyhow, we were back with Johnny. He said, "I'm going to put this kid with you," and that, who was Animal's brother. Now, Johnny had a business degree. He'd been working for a big company, making good money.
Was it Honeywell or something like that?
Honeywell, you got it, sweetie. Give me a kiss. Yeah.
Have that.
Yeah. Sleepy Joe doesn't mind, over in this country now, you can dress like a woman and still be a man. You know all about that, right, with this country at the moment?
Yeah, I know.
Crazy. Anyhow, he put him with us, and we worked with him around, and we taught Johnny the business, or, the business, and then in situations we did 6 months down the line, he was still training to school, getting trained in the ring and all that sort of stuff, going there during the day. And then now and again, they put him at 6 mans. Then Butch had to go away. About a year and a half later, he had to go away and get knee surgery. Oh, they split the territory and they put us in Dallas on the West Coast with Jim Barnett in the office there running the West Coast for NWA. And we drove over to Texas from Charlotte and that, and we got a big apartment. We had three bedrooms, so Johnny was living with us. Now Johnny was a good-looking kid, and here's two guys. Here's two guys now. We got our heads shaved because Roddy Piper shaved our both heads twice, and we kept it short and that. And he got these two crazy guys, and he's leading us around with the New Zealand flag. And as he was in the ring and listening to us every night, he could hear us talking to the baby faces and that. Every night we came out, marked out, and we did, as soon as the baby faces come to the ring with the music, the old style, they used to stop an introduction. They would introduce the heels, then we used to do the flag salute. Johnny used to hold the flag, me at the other end or Butch at the other end, and we always used to salute the flag. This night, I handed him the flag, I took my teeth out and gave him my teeth in the hand. And in one of the spot shows, he turned around with that flag and whacked me with a flag in front of all the fans. Can you believe that? The people didn't know what was going on. He put the teeth in my hand. I forgot to take him out before I went to the ring. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I was going to pull them then, but I'm not going to pull them.
No,
anyhow, that's Johnny. Oh, yeah. Anyhow, was with us. Anyhow, and then in the end, we left there just when, and 6 months after he left, Turner, there's a whole story about how the promotion stood downhill with Dusty. I don't want to get into that. I can get into that tomorrow. I can tell you how it happened. The NWA and Turner took over, bought the company, and changed the WCW, and that's when he put Shane Douglas and Johnny together as the dudes. What are they?
The Dynamic Dudes.
The Dynamic Dudes. And that's, Shane, it's a rib. That was a rib. And then Johnny was very clumsy on his feet, but had great psychology. But Johnny was a businessman. Anyhow, he was so shrewd that he's got his brother who's going to Japan now to get a book with Barber for $2,500 a week at the start. And he went over there and he was going to the Japanese dojo over there. And as the story goes, he spent 10 years working for Barber. The last 6 years, he was the booker. And of course, Barber died. He took all the shirts. You know, they loved American T-shirts. He was shipping all the fucking shirts over there. He was making, you know, that much a week, thousands, and all the merchandise profit too. A lot of from the profit and that. He had his finger in there, and he used to, every time he come home between tours, you know, they would do 26 tours a year or 20 tours a year. I don't know how many 8-month tours a year, 10 month tours a year. He was over there for the mall and that, and he used to come home, and we lived about 10 miles apart in Florida, and he used to say to me, I want to come back to the States. I said, Johnny, run that Japan dry. Don't come over here. You've always got America and you're fresh. If you come here and then you start, and then you go back to Japan, you won't be making it as good. So he stayed there for 10. Then he came back and he spent 9 months with WCW, and that's when Vince bought it out. When he came back, WCW was the stories about him telling me in the dressing room. None of the boys, you know, the boys were running the territory. Bishop wasn't on the road. The boys were doing what they wanted to do. And, it was a drug-infested fucking... Vince bought it for pennies. You know, you heard how much he bought WCW, and that library was worth millions.
Yeah, 2.5 million in total. The legal fees were nearly as much.
That library today, you know, going right back to the 70s, you can't put a price on it.
Hey James, can we cut it there?
Yeah, no worries. In fact, I'm going to as well. It's lucky Johnny Ace had a fan in Mrs. Barber. But we'll move on then. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. This is going to be part 1 of a bumper 2-part edition. Bushwhacker Luke, he's coming back tomorrow for another couple of hours where we're going to be talking about the WWF and everything in between. Ted Turner we're going to get to as well, and a load more stories. But for now, thank you, Luke, for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.
Great talking to you, and James, has been great here talking to you, and the fans out there. This is from Bushwhacker Luke. I'm out. Whoa! Yay!